right, welcome to another episode review on Everfree Radio. My name is Final Draft, and I'm here with Nash.
Hello.
And today we have an honored guest reviewer, one Mr. Foal Papers. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell our audience who you are, what you've done, where they might have heard of you before?
The main place people would have seen me is probably on Twitter. I tweet a lot with the Twitter bronies and the Twitter ponies. There's a really good community of fans on Twitter. It's good fun interacting with them. I also had a presentation at the last BronyCon, or I was meant to have a presentation at the last BronyCon, and it didn't really go off too well. We had some technical issues, and I ended up having to post it on YouTube instead. People have seen it there, and people seem to like it. It's just fun to talk about that kind of thing. I'm big on mythology and classics, and talking about how the show has a lot more going on under the surface.
As a fellow classics nerd, I have to give you all the props, all the internets for what you've done to bring the mythological elements of the show to the consciousness of bronies worldwide.
Thank you. It's just nice to see the response and people really getting into it, and I think we're going to take over the fandom. It starts with you and I, and we'll go from there.
Yes, it begins soon.
The classicists will rule.
Muhaha. Okay, so today we are reviewing the episode Mystery on the Friendship Express. This was kind of a pretty straightforward episode. It featured Pinkie Pie and the crew trying to transport a marzipan cake, a marzipan mascarpone meringue madness cake, to Canterlot for the National Dessert Competition, I believe is what it was called. And in transport, the cake is partially eaten, and so Pinkie Pie tries to investigate and hilarity ensues. But you know what I think was really strong about this episode is that it brought to light a lot of new and almost forgotten characters from the series. And I know Nash noticed a couple of them.
Yeah, so we had Donut Joe that we last saw in The Best Night Ever returning. And we got another griffin called Gustave Legrand, who was French, and also a new donkey, Mulia Mild.
And I think Mulia Mild as a name is a bit of a reference in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was to Julia Child, the American chef and media personality, especially the voice. It struck me very much as an American trying to sound sort of snooty and English, which kind of is Julia Child's voice.
We also get some other characters that have been making more frequent appearances this season. We see the Cakes couple again, at the beginning at least. They are the creators of the Marzipan Madness. And I thought that it was kind of nice to see them in another episode because, well, we've been getting a lot of other returning characters this season that have made more appearances in Season 2 than they ever did in Season 1. And Foal Papers, before we started recording today, you were mentioning how you like their design.
I do. I mean, they're different than most of the ponies we see on screen, and I think the animators probably have a lot of fun with them. Plus, they're just fun characters. Watching Mr. Cake pass out 3 times, I felt like he needed to borrow Rarity's fainting couch.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
Yeah, and we also have Big Mac again, and he's back to saying just yup, rather than being verbose like he was in the last episode.
I think that's probably for the best, but that's just my perspective. He doesn't really have the voice for being verbose, but again, that's just my opinion.
He chooses his moments wisely.
He's quite sage, isn't he?
Well, it was hilarious to get him to talk and see Applejack do all the yup and nope in last episode. If it happened too often, it would lose its humor.
Indeed. So we get this cast of characters all assembled together on the Friendship Express, that train that we see at the beginning of every episode, and that has really been making more frequent appearances throughout the show. But the title of the episode itself, Mystery on the Friendship Express, is kind of a shout out to another well-known title. And Foal, you were mentioning that earlier.
Yes, it was really cool to see that. It was a shout out to Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. It's a mystery novel, detective novel, and big in its time, and they've done tons of adaptations of it over the years. And of course, we have all these nods to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes as well.
Yeah, we get the hats and the pipe and everything. So Pinkie's Sherlock Holmes, and Twilight is Dr. Watson, the lowly assistant who asks silly questions with obvious answers. It's elementary, my dear Twilight.
Well, I like how Pinkie tries to take that serious logical role and completely fails at it. And Twilight just stands by looking kind of frustrated. I gotta say, Twilight in the Watson hat looking frustrated is quite adorkable. Just can't be helped.
Yeah, Twilight was being adorkable in general in this episode.
And then again, she's always adorkable, isn't she?
Indeed.
And just the trading the hats back and forth, that was a very nice touch.
I completely agree. That's something that wouldn't have been written in the script. That's something that the animators did to highlight the script. And I thought that was kind of a nice, subtle, but really well thought out element, that every time they kind of switch roles throughout the scenes, they switch the hats. And Twilight even wipes off the bubble pipe and then starts using that when she's pondering or investigating. I really like that element.
Calabash pipes are now canon. I'm pleased with that too.
No argument here.
Twilight is best detective, and she's read many mystery novels, so that's how she knows all this stuff.
I like how she had a handy manila folder available to her to keep all the evidence filed away. I suppose that's just part of her character, though, to be ready to organize anything.
Wait, do you mean you don't carry around manila envelopes all the time?
I'm not going to admit to doing that.
Well, I feel really bad now. I mean, what am I carrying all these envelopes around for then?
Oh, it's okay.
It's CSI Equestria.
Well, there are other really blatant references in this episode as well, especially when Pinkie Pie starts accusing specific bitter bakers, of ruining the cake. For example, she accuses Gustave Legrand of a complex silent film scheme where he puts the cake on a classic cartoon conveyor belt towards a deadly saw, and of course Pinkie Pie is tied up and thrown on the rail tracks in her little description of the scene. I really enjoyed that they made him out to be this old-timey villain, and they played the silent film piano music and had the placards with the old-timey script. You cur!
They love bringing that out. It took me back to the episode All's Well That Ends Well, with Spike twirling his moustache.
Yeah, and the black cape and the evil laugh. Every stereotype, villain, trope.
And then her next accusation victim is Pony Joe, aka Donut Joe. And I don't know which way to go with this yet. Twilight calls him Donut Joe at the beginning of the episode, but he clearly has his place Pony Joe in The Best Night Ever. So I don't know. Which way were you guys going to call him?
I was going to stick with Pony Joe, I think. That's the name by which I first knew him, and maybe now it's wrong, but I honestly don't know.
I'm thinking Donut Joe is kind of a nickname, because he makes donuts, so he gets called Donut Joe, but it's not his name.
That makes sense.
I think we do know what his real name is now. It's Con Maine. The James Bond reference. I got a real kick out of that instead of seeing a gun barrel going across the screen, you see donuts, and then instead of blood, it's jelly.
Yeah, and he's drinking a milkshake, so it's shaken, not stirred. And his milkshake brings all the fillies to the yard.
You had to say it, didn't you?
Indeed.
Rarity certainly seems to think so, obviously.
She wants to make him a tuxedo.
That's the next great shipping fic, I think, yeah.
Oh dear, shipping fix.
Rarity's fashion ideas aside, I really like how in that sequence of accusations, each of the schemes were presented as their own film style. Like we just mentioned, the old-timey silent film, the James Bond style with Con Maine, and then I think my personal favorite, which is the anime ninja kung fu Kill Bill style for Mulia Mild.
Samurai swords are now canon. I just about lost it at that part where the sword flips from a sidelong view to a head-down view on it. Very stylized, very nice piece of work.
I never thought I would say it, but that donkey was pretty badass.
That was terrible. Oh, the puns, why?
Sorry, had to be said. I did like how they had that 70s orangish look to that scene as well, to make it look like some sort of B Hong Kong film.
That's a film I would watch.
Totally.
Well, it felt very anime-inspired to me, where they split it up into different boxes, and all these lines in the action sequences and stuff like that. That just rings anime to me.
I predict that within the next day there's going to be a mashup of that with the music from Kill Bill on YouTube. Someone will put it up with Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood.
Oh, absolutely. I really hope they do. If they haven't yet, do it, fans, do it, because that's a great song and the film deserves it.
You'll make me very happy.
Do it, Philly.
Do it, Philly. Well, and for all of these scenes, there's one key element that I think we have Will Anderson and his entire team to thank for, and that is the background music. It's so appropriate for each of those scenes, but also overall for the entire episode. I got a real kick out of it personally when Gustave Legrand appears and you hear this just horribly stereotypical French accordion music.
This is not so! For I, Gustave Legrand, do challenge your crude cake to a duel of delectable delicacies against my exceptionally exquisite eclairs!
It was over the top, but it really just added to the scene.
Yeah, and the silent film music, I thought that was really fitting, like the typical silent film style.
It just really all added to it.
The James Bond one was fitting, though it was reused from the scene where Rainbow Dash sneaks into the hospital to steal a book.
Well, you gotta forgive them for that. It's not unusual for cartoons to reuse music, and I think this show has done it less than most.
When we talked to William Anderson, he asked 1 week to write all the music for the episode, and if you don't have time, then you can reuse something that still fits.
Indeed. Well, there have been several things that have been made canon as a result of this episode, including laser security systems.
And now we have samurai swords as well, to go along with tanks and bullets.
There really does seem to be a whole military theme building up, isn't there?
They're building up an arsenal, it's amazing. Off that, there's also the military outfit in the portrait hanging in the train, which I quite liked as well, because that was another clear nod to the time and the place, the setting of the original novel.
It did have that kind of late Victorian, early 20th century feel, didn't it?
It did.
Well, and of course, Rarity evidently wears false eyelashes. It's not too much of a shock, but it's still another thing that's canon to go along with Fluttershy's hair extensions, I suppose.
Oh, these ponies, so shallow. And the admission of wearing false eyelashes was a much bigger admission than actually eating the cake. She just mentions that in passing after the huge admission of having false eyelashes.
I absolutely love it when Rarity goes over the top. She's just so funny when she does that. Oh, it's true. I get a real kick out of that.
Yeah, we need a drama couch.
Yeah, where's the drama couch? Well, and aside from the animation and the music of this episode, actually the writing really shined through. And that was because Amy Keating Rogers, the writer for this episode, really used alliteration, and more alliteration. Pinkie Pie, and really, by extension, Andrea Libman, has quite the vocabulary this episode.
Yeah, there were a lot of alliterations, like the name of the cake for one, and there was also a fair bit of puns.
I was really a fan of Twy's line towards the end about the cake culprit, and when committing a crime, it's crucial that one never leaves behind clues, that they were all getting in on the act by the end of it.
Well, I wrote down a few of the juicier examples. For example, the cake itself was called the Marzipan Mascarpone Meringue Madness, which was later mutilated. I liked that the donuts were do-nots, the eclairs lacked flair, that the bakers were apparently bitter bakers. In terms of alliteration for this episode, I think that the real crowning moment was when Pinkie Pie was going around explaining the different desserts in the middle of the episode. She calls Pony Joe's or Donut Joe's or whatever you want to call him. She calls his Donut City a, quote, spectacular city of donut delight topped temptingly with sprinklicious sprinkles. She calls the eclairs, or she says that the eclairs look incredibly edible with glistening glaziness. And then she says that Mulia Mild's Moose Moose is mouth-wateringly marvelous and tempts the taste buds with silky, smooth, yummy, nummy chocolatiness. I mean, good God.
Yeah, and I love that moose thing. That was hilarious.
Well, and later on in the episode, we see that Gustav gets some moose in his moustache. But overall, the whole episode was just a barrage of alliteration and rhyming and puns. I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it too. Amy Keating Rogers really writes wonderful episodes when it comes to that kind of wordplay. I was really got a kick out of Pegasistance at the beginning as well. I think that needs to be kind of a new fan term. And also, who did do it? I can't even say it right, but it's a sign of how much I like Pinkie that I can let her get away with that. Usually I'd be there with a blackboard diagramming, no, actually that's the word you want to put there, and that's not the correct form of that word.
Now I have no idea who done it. Yeah, I love that line. I saw it in the trailer as well, and it just cracked me up. It's so adorable.
It's a great line.
There was one line when I was watching this episode that I immediately thought of you, Foal Papers, when I heard, and I think you know which line I'm thinking of.
Oh, is that the By Jove line?
It might be the By Jove line, yes.
Ah, yes, the classical allusions again.
They've really been rich with those this season, haven't they?
Between that and Tartarus and Cerberus, it just made me so happy.
Well, so overall, this entire episode really was not as much of a character study as some of the stronger episodes this season, I think. I mean, this wasn't a Lesson Zero. This wasn't a Sister Who's Social. This episode was more or less just putting the characters into a setting and letting the setting be the focus. This episode was about the train and about the dessert and the mystery. It wasn't about character development. I wanted to get your opinions on that.
Well, it's true, it wasn't about character development, but it was still about characters, like the characters we know and like, doing what they do, like Pinky being silly and Twilight being smart and dorkable, and I really enjoyed seeing that. There doesn't need to be development in every episode. I like seeing the characters the way they are, and this episode was funny, no doubt about it. I'm quite happy with this episode, actually.
Yeah, I agree with Nash completely. Not every episode has to be sort of epic and have this dramatic narrative to it. I think they really do work when you just take these well-drawn characters and put them in a situation and just watch it play out for the laughs. And it was very funny. I was just sitting there laughing and enjoying it for what it was.
And I would agree with that. I do think we should acknowledge that a lot of the fans, I suspect, are going to list this as a lower ranked episode for this season just because they've come to expect that sort of very character-heavy, impactful type of episode. But I think it's good to have a balance where you have some episodes like this one, or Ne'er-Do-Well, where it's not necessarily about character growth, it's more just seeing the characters exploring their setting or interacting given a certain setting. Although I agree with you guys, I think that this was a funny, fun episode to watch. I think that a lot of fans are going to react to it and think that it was maybe less deep than some of the earlier episodes this season.
Well, everyone likes different aspects of the show, and some like those more development-heavy episodes, and I enjoy those too, but I can just find the humor and stuff and leave it at that.
It's hard to argue with an episode that has so much Pinky Twilight interaction in it. I love those scenes as well. And in Pinkie Pie, again, with her antics, she's just adorable and hilarious.
Oh yeah, and I mean Twilight is best pony, and I love seeing her being smart and adorable and logical and all that. And Pinky, you can't really rate her on like best pony. If you have a one-dimensional scale, then she will invent her own second dimension, because you can't really compare her because she's just so random and silly and funny. So those characters, like those two, and interaction between those two is just always funny to see.
And I think the other ponies had some nice moments too. I mean, Rarity with her false eyelashes was good fun, and Fluttershy in the conductor's hat, that was a really cute moment.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with that.
Yeah, and Applejack had her moment too. At the beginning, she was so eager to eat the treats, yet she was one of the few who didn't actually eat anything.
And going off of that, I actually have to say I was predicting that it was going to be Pinkie Pie who somehow was at fault. That was my take on it, that she was going to be the one who had maybe eaten some of the cake or something. So I was kind of happy to be surprised that it wasn't her.
Yeah, I was counting on that too, especially after seeing the trailer where she was guarding the cake and falling asleep, and I thought, like, okay, she's gonna sleepwalk and eat it, because she was talking so much about how great the cake was and how tasty it's gonna be, and I figured, like, she's gonna eat it in her sleep and then try to solve a crime where she's the perpetrator, and it will be ridiculous.
It's nice that for a mystery episode that they had those sort of red herrings and they were trying to hint you in one direction and then taking you in a different one.
Yeah, and they also had some foreshadowing. Rarity was wearing her hair differently. If you paid attention to that, you could figure it out, like a good mystery should.
Well, and I definitely caught it when Pinky was chasing what turned out to be Rainbow Dash down towards the caboose of the train. During that section, before they revealed it was her, you can kind of see that it's her silhouette. So they paid attention to those details.
Yeah, and she seemed to be moving rather fast. There's all speed lines forming behind her, so it did seem like Rainbow Dash, but it didn't fit with my theory, so I just thought it was like a misdirection.
Come to think of it, it did seem odd to me that they would go from being really supportive, trying to get this cake onto the train, to suddenly they had all taken a bite of this cake. Really? That's just out of character for them.
Well, it's interesting in hindsight, looking at Rainbow Dash, and you'd think loyalty, she would be, backing Pinky up on staying and defending it, but she's one of the ones who was most ardent about, going off to bed and letting it alone. But if you think back at the end of the episode, well, was she being loyal by saying, I've got to distance myself from this cake because she's made it sound really tasty and I don't trust myself now, so the best thing I can do to be loyal to Pinky is to get myself out of the room?
I think this is one of those moments that somebody will invariably say, well, this is a kid's show, we can't overthink it, right? But again, that was one little disconnect that didn't make sense to me. Why would they protect the cake so much, getting it onto the train, and then slip and try and take bites of it? I don't know.
I suppose you shouldn't talk about how great something is and then tell people they can't have it.
Yeah, I suppose.
So the moral of the story is Pinky just shouldn't talk.
I think the moral of the story is that Pinky shouldn't talk, but then when she does, she shouldn't accuse people. But then when she does, she should learn to gather evidence before accusing people.
So the moral of the story is it's Pinky's fault. Always.
I think the moral of the story is that Ponyville knows how to bake desserts.
No, the moral of the story is clearly that logic solves everything.
Well, that's the other thing that I noticed, though, with Ponyville knowing how to bake desserts. They were all boarding the train in Ponyville, presumably. That was the Ponyville station, right?
Yes.
Right. And yet you've got, I don't know where the other two are coming in from, but you've got Pony Joe or Donut Joe. You'd think he would be in Canterlot already. Why was he in Ponyville to go all the way back to Canterlot?
Well, he says he was there to pick up the finishing touches for his masterpiece.
Did they say that? Oh, I completely missed that.
Yeah, it was something, but the thing seemed done already, so I assume it was just like the sprinkles or something, because that's the only thing we see him put on.
Well, I feel like a jackass now.
No, it's all right. There is one other illogical point of that, which is that Pony Joe's is in Canterlot. If he made the dessert there, why would he take it all the way to Ponyville just to get the sprinkles for it and then take it back to Canterlot? That just seemed a little off. Of course, somebody could argue he was trying to keep it close to him to guard it or something, but that's looking at it too closely, maybe.
It's what we do.
Yeah, you're talking about looking at it too closely to the guy who did a presentation on the mythology of it?
I suppose I'm the last to talk.
There's no such thing as looking at it too... No, but there really is.
Okay, so overall, out of 5 over-the-top desserts, what would you rank this episode?
Well, let's see. I gave Dragon Quest 3.5, I think. And I actually think this episode is better because it was more fun and you had more Twilight being adorable and Pinky being silly. So I'm going to give this 4 mms.
Alright, and Foal Papers, for your first episode review, how many over-the-top desserts out of 5 would you give it?
I really enjoyed this episode. It was just very light, very entertaining. I think Pinky had some brilliant moments. I would say 4 over-the-top desserts out of 5. Or I should say 4 out of 5 over-the-top puddings, since I'm English.
I like pudding.
Well, overall, I would give this a 4 out of 5 as well. And the reason why is that although it's not as strong as some episodes this season, it is a very enjoyable episode. I think that when this review comes out, there are going to be a lot of people who disagree with us because many of the fans have come to expect these episodes to really be action-packed and super dramatic and tons of character development, but I think that it's important and valuable that there are episodes in a season that just take the characters and put them into a setting and just go with it. Not every episode has to have an end purpose, and so I thought it was really enjoyable. I really liked all of Pinky's lines. I liked her interaction with Twilight again. I mean, Twilight is best pony, this is known, and so I think overall 4 out of 5 seems like a solid rating for me. Well, that's it for our episode review of Mystery on the Friendship Express. I'm Final Draft.
And I'm Nash.
And I'm Foal Papers.